Welcome to the Calling the Quarters podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is season 2, episode 11. I want to welcome you back to the podcast, listeners. Today we're honored to have Lasara Firefox Allen joining us. Lasara is a multifaceted leader in the pagan community, a writer, game designer, sex educator, and a second-generation ordained priest. Lasara's journey is deeply rooted in pagan traditions. Firefox is written and taught in the fields of spirituality, human sexuality, parenting, and bipolar disorder, and their work on sexuality and spirituality has been a powerful force. We're eager to explore their experiences growing up in the Greenfield Ranch international community, their insights on female empowerment, and the many ways they integrate magic into the world. So prepare to have a thought-provoking conversation with Lasara Firefox Allen. Settle in, and we'll delve into their wellspring of wisdom. Welcome to the Calling the Quarter podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones, and today we're speaking with Lasara Firefox Allen, who is a writer. Lasara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dean. I'm very, very happy to be here today.
Now, for our listeners who are not familiar with you or where you're from, can you tell us a little bit about where you were raised and where you live now?
Absolutely. So I am California born and bred. I was born on a commune in the South Bay, in just outside of the Menlo Park area, up in the hills of like near La Honda, and that was during the sort of commune heydays. And then my parents moved back to the land, and by that I mean out to a homesteading experience in the rurals of Northern California. So my parents moved to Mendocino County to a ranch called Greenfield Ranch, which they helped to settle with a collective of other folks. And it was really rooted in the love of the land. So I was raised with very sort of, earth-oriented grounding, like on a spiritual level, but also on a very pragmatic level. Like we lived in the elements. We had a lot of exposure to the elements. We grew our own food, grew animals and slaughtered and ate them. We had a very, very sort of homesteading, traditional homesteading lifestyle. And that said, it was a hippie experiment. My parents were hippies, and it was part of sort of the hippie awakening. And my mom was very motivated to by quotes like, or ethos like live gently on the earth. Um, don't take more than you need. So we grew up very much in that mindset.
I want to talk a little bit about this. Talk a little bit more about this. Now, you said that this was a unique community with a focus on intentional living. Can you tell us more about this upbringing and how it shaped your approach to spirituality and personal growth? And I want to ask, people might think that it was a no-brainer that you came to paganism, but is that necessarily true? I don't want to really make that as an assumption.
Yeah, no, it's not a no-brainer. That I mean, many folks who were raised in the same environment that I was raised in are now, any number of different faiths, from, I mean, really fundamentalist Christian, which there was a lot, interestingly, there was a lot of overlap. I was homeschooled through high school, so there was a lot of overlap between sort of the hippie homeschoolers and the fundamentalist homeschoolers of the 70s and 80s. So that was an interesting sort of experience. We definitely had some exposure to those sort of fundamentalist homeschooling families in homeschooling collective environments, for example. So there was a lot, and also being raised in rural Northern California, there was a lot of sort of libertarian influence, a lot of salt of the earth, folks
Yeah.
who are not necessarily, they might be like more pagan in practice than a lot of folks because they're living so close to the land. But theologically, many of them are not anywhere near pagan.
So, as a second generation witch and ordained priest, how did you integrate your spiritual practice with your work as a sex educator and writer?
So I came into sex education in the in my like late teens, early 20s. And the reason that that happened was because I came of age in the during the, advent of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And so my sort of, my impetus for becoming a sex educator was uh you know, in the same way that I grew up under kind of the nuclear shadow, I also, as a Gen Xer, right? I
Yeah.
also grew up under the kind of sex equals death, and silence is complicity vibe of the really intense time of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
I lost my first dear person to AIDS when I was like 16. Um,
Jesus.
yeah, and became a also an at-home healthcare provider for folks who were in end-stage AIDS in my early 20s. And during that time, I was also doing what I could in my community to help folks to gain the skills that they needed to enjoy their bodies and participate in sexuality without risking, um, you know, uh, anything that wasn't wanted. Um, that so I started with safer sex education, basically. And I started with safer sex education in the communities that I lived in. So that was like the punk community, the pagan community, the back to the land community. So that was kind of how the two merged initially for me, was just circumstantially. Later, I also became a sex worker and did a lot of other work around sexual identity and sexual awareness and owning my own sexuality. And all of those elements also came together very much under my devotion and dedication to my pagan values.
Your book, Sexy Witch, has been influential in discussions about female sexuality. Can you elaborate on the ideas about how sexuality and spirituality can be intertwined for women's empowerment?
Definitely. Thank you for that question. It's an important one, and I have a few things to say on this topic. The first one that I want to say is that I came out as genderqueer a number of years ago now, and so I go by they, them pronouns at this point in time. So my vantage point has definitely evolved since I wrote Sexy Witch. That said, I want to say I have evolved, and my sort of reality around sexuality and sexual identity has evolved since then. It came out 19 years ago. I wrote it 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Um, Culture has evolved since then. So I want to say all that, but I also want to say I'm very proud of that book.
Yeah.
I got fan mail. I still occasionally get an email from somebody saying, this book changed my life. And some of the things that folks cited in that were, I had a story from a reader who was in her 50s, I believe at the time, had never had an orgasm and had never looked at her vulva. And so she went through the work of Sexy Witch, and like for the first time in her life in her 50s claimed her body. And so that kind of potential awakening is, has many doorways that people can walk through, but the more of those doorways, the better, in my opinion. um Sexy Witch is about self-referential sexual empowerment, so it's not a relational sexual frame. It's very much about finding our sexuality in our bodies and experiencing it for ourselves primarily, and then finding out how we might want to share it with others or not, right? And so
Yeah.
that makes it very different than a lot of the sort of sex magic books that are out there, right? A lot of them are interactive. And
I
I
remember.
think,
Go
yeah, I
ahead.
think ultimately, I think knowing yourself and loving yourself can lead to a healthier internal terrain. And so, yeah, like I said, anything that helps us get there.
Do you think the kind of feelings about our own sexuality that we have as a hangover from patriarchal religions, do you think it kind of stays with people even when they go into a goddess religion? Is it really hard to shake that off?
What 100%. And, I mean, I was raised more or less in pagan culture, but I was raised by parents who were not raised in pagan culture, right?
Yeah.
Also, I have this kind of, soapbox where I say, counterculture is still dominant culture,
Yeah.
right? Because it's in opposition to the thing that we're fighting, right? But it's
Yeah.
defined by dominant culture. So even counterculture is defined by the dominant paradigm. And within paganism and neo-paganism and Wicca and all of the other permutations, there is a lot of work that needs to be done around deconstructing our relationship with patriarchy, around deconstructing our relationship with gender essentialism. Gender essentialism is like a huge element of paganism. It's really kind of baked into it in that. And what I mean by it, when I say gender essentialism, what I mean is the idea that women are a thing and have innate capacities and meanings and potential, and that men are a thing and have innate capacities and meaning and potential, right?
Yeah.
And so that the idea of a polarized male female spectrum is sort of lends itself to gender essentialism. And gender essentialism is like, so Jailbreaking the Goddess, my more recent book, I
Yeah.
talk about the maiden, mother, and crone system and how it's based in biological determinism, basically. It's based in our capacity to procreate. So
Yeah.
it's pre-menarche, menarche, post-menarche, maiden, mother, crone. And so much of what the mother archetype is based in is about utility to the community, right? What she
Right.
can, what she offers, what she holds, what she's willing to do,
Yeah.
and so it's not so much about the primary identification of who I am,
Right.
right? And so that gender essentialism, I think, has been baked, and I believe that gender essentialism is based in patriarchy, and it's been baked into neo-paganism.
Can we talk about this book a little bit? I want to talk about your new book, Jailbreaking the Goddess. Can we discuss this and tell us about this book and kind of discuss this topic more in depth?
Definitely. So in Jailbreaking the Goddess, I talk about the maiden mother crone archetypal system, and I talk about an alternative to the maiden mother crone archetypal system. And the model that I offer in Jailbreaking the Goddess is a fivefold model that is not based in uh, procreative utility.
Right.
It's not based in our capacity to procreate. It's based in stages of development and evolution as an individual. When I was writing Jailbreaking the Goddess was when I was coming to terms with my identity as a genderqueer person. I did not come out as genderqueer until after the book was written. And so some of it definitely still has that frame of like female-based feminine feminism. I'm still absolutely a feminist, don't get me wrong.
Right.
And I believe in liberation and emancipation of all beings through equality, through liberation. And jailbreaking was written in 2016. I would still write some of it differently today if I were writing it now, just because
Yeah.
of my vantage on gender.
Right. And I wanted to ask also, you've spoken openly about living with bipolar disorder, and this is something that I think we're only grasping and starting to understand as a community now. Can you share your experience and insights on navigating the challenges and opportunities of being an entrepreneur with this condition?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think it is so important that we speak openly about mental health struggles and realities.
Yeah.
Um, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in my late 20s. I had a genetic predisposition. My father has bipolar disorder, and it probably goes back multiple generations, but of course, we didn't have the language for it before my father's generation.
Yeah.
So having had a predisposition for bipolar disorder, I started recognizing that it was bipolar disorder in my early to mid 20s. That's when I started showing symptoms. And the medical professionals and my like trusted advisors were like, you don't want a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. It's a big thing to carry, right? And I
Right.
was like, when I finally got my diagnosis of bipolar disorder and was able to successfully medicate it and successfully treat it in lifestyle ways, um, it was liberating. And I wish that people had not built up resistance to the diagnosis for me. I wish that I had had more access to tools earlier on, because coming to terms with bipolar disorder is what has made it possible to build the life that I want to live.
I mean, until recently, I think celebrities are starting to talk about their struggles with it. And so it's become something that is a little bit more accepted now. But I think for the longest time, it was an insult or a term of derision. People would have been terrified to admit that they had bipolar disorder. I myself struggle with mental illness issues, and it's something that you don't want to tell your coworkers. You don't want to tell a potential date. Like, it's not something you're going to mention, but you should mention on the first date, hey, I have this issue. I'm seeking counseling, that kind of thing. We have a lot of language around it we didn't have like 10, 20 years ago, right?
Absolutely, no doubt. And no shade to the folks that were supporting me through those experiences. And I'm glad that we have different tools now to help our young people to find the tools that they need to survive mental health complications and struggles. So, I mean, I think it's worth sharing some of the techniques that I use to keep myself stable. And I want to say, shout out to modern medicine. Medication is a huge part of my treatment plan, and is a successful component to the life that I live. Um, Also cannot be underrated, exercise on a daily basis, staying active, staying healthy in my body, getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating properly, those basic self-care elements that for some people are not essential to their daily functioning. For folks with bipolar disorder, those are super important. And so keeping track of all that. And another tool that I really use a lot and rely on a lot is scheduling and structure.
God, I mean, I totally identify with everything you're saying, and I really second that. That's really so important. I really think that's something that a lot of people don't think about until it becomes a crisis. Then it's something that you're struggling to do. I want to talk to you a little bit about neurolinguistic programming. You're a certified neurolinguistic programming master practitioner. How does NLP complement your work in other areas such as sex education or personal development workshops?
NLP is an amazing set of tools. It's an expansive arena of different methodologies. And I have been working with neurolinguistic programming for, close to 30 years.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah, 25 plus years. So I've only been certified for, maybe, I don't know, 17, 18. No, longer than that. I've been certified for about 20. So, um, so it's been a huge part of my reality as a person for most of my adult life. I think neurolinguistic programming is has a lot of potential. And there are a lot of other things that people don't know are related to NLP, like a lot of different mental health techniques, honestly, are rooted in neurolinguistic programming. I use neurolinguistic programming for myself on a regular basis. I use it with my clients as a coach. I use it in my teaching all the time. I use it in my day-to-day reality. I'm an executive director at a nonprofit as a full-time gig right now and have been for a number of years. So I use it in that work as well. It is like there are some techniques like reframes, which are basic, right? So,
Right.
and we use them all the time, right? We use them all the time. We can say, somebody says, I can't ever get this thing right.
Yeah.
And we say, is there a time when you got it right? What would that look like if you got it right?
Yeah.
Right? What would it be? What is getting it right? What does that even mean? right? So giving people a chance to reframe their experience is like a basic element of our interaction, and it's a basic NLP technique. There are a lot of ways that NLP plays in. It's also in my books. It's throughout all of my, it's influenced everything in my life, honestly.
Now, I want to talk to you about gratitude games. You've designed a game focused on cultivating gratitude. What inspired you to create this game, and why do you believe gratitude is such an important practice, especially within families?
Well, gratitude is to put it one way, gratitude is a programming technique for your brain. One of the things I love about gratitude practice is I start doing, like, I play a game with my kids. My kids are grown now, they're 24 and 27,
Yeah.
but I still play this game with them to this day. When we do something together, or even when they do something separately, like my older kid just went to Brazil recently and did a language immersion course and had a whole experience there for 3 weeks. Amazing. We were talking on the phone because I wanted to hear about it. And I said, I don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to hear some things about, your trip. And so I said, she was like, how am I going to decide what to tell you? And I said, okay, what was your favorite part? And so we start with one favorite part and it just spreads to other favorite parts, right? So we're
Yeah.
selecting for the most delightful parts of our day or our experience, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what gratitude does. It's a filter that allows us to notice all the good things that are happening.
Nice.
And so I think that that can really impact family dynamics. I think it can really impact personal dynamics, personal well-being. Um, you know, Gratitude practice it literally heals the heart physically. Um, they have found there have been studies that have shown that when people are recovering from heart surgery or heart disease, that if they do a gratitude practice, their recovery rates are better.
This reminds me of a quote from Tom Waits where he said that we plant our bad days and they grow into really big bad days. Is this kind of like the opposite? You're kind of planting good days?
Yep, exactly, exactly, exactly.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about you've been on TV shows like Sexetra and other TV shows as a sex educator. Can you talk about some of these and the opportunities using media to promote healthy sexuality?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one, right? Because those sort of mainstream avenues are always going to have a frame that may not feel totally authentic or unique to us.
Yeah.
So right, the balancing act is like, how much good can I get in here without having my identity or words twisted to the point where it's unrecognizable?
Yeah.
Right. And some of those experiences were more successful than others, I will say.
Well, yeah, because they want to minimize everything down to like, content. So you end up with like this 1 minute spot where they're like, we have witch and writer Lasara Firefox and they're trying to like, spin it to be something that, and how can you really, is it hard to kind of get a good message out when you're kind of condensed to a soundbite?
Definitely. And the other part too is like you have to show up a certain way to be on mainstream media, even as an
Hmm.
outlier, even as an alternative lifestyle person, you have to appear a certain way. You have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way. I was just thinking the other day, I think it was HBO, was in my house filming maybe it was Etc. I don't remember which one it was. They were filming and they were doing a talking head interview with me as filler for the segment. And um and they made me tape my nipples.
What?
They made me tape my nipples.
Are you kidding me?
No, no.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because my nipples were too prominent. So I had to tape my nipples under my bra. Um
Oh my God.
so yeah, they were like filming and they were like, okay, hold on, hold on. So, super funny. So, it was like a sex oriented show and they still had me tape my nipples.
My God, that speaks volumes, I think. That's kind of sad that we, wow. I'm kind of speechless from that. That's crazy. So
It's
a
so funny.
sex show.
Yeah, I was just randomly thinking about that driving in my car the other day. I don't even remember how it came up.
Oh my God. Um, do you have any future projects that you're working on that you want to talk about? Maybe workshops or books that are coming up?
Yeah, 100% I do have a lot going on. I don't have any books coming out right now. To be honest with you, I've written a few, but I have not published any of them for a variety of reasons.
Hmm.
My most recent endeavor into writing was highly hilarious and entertaining for me, and I wrote a romance,
Hmm.
and it was very fun and very entertaining. And maybe I'll get back to editing it someday and see if it's publishable. I don't know. Who knows? And I have other projects that I'm working on in that arena too. I would love to write more about non-binary and genderqueer identity at some point.
Wow,
You
that'd be
know,
good.
yeah, I have a lot of different ideas about what I might write about, but that all takes time and energy and focus and, restructuring of life. And currently, right now, I'm spending all of my free time doing bodybuilding because my current pursuit is I want to compete in a bodybuilding competition.
Oh, that's hard work. You must be,
Yeah.
that's a real, I mean, I know people who've done that and it's a lot. I mean, you have to do, it changes your whole life. It's a lifestyle. It isn't something you just do for a couple hours a day, right?
Right. I'm training 5 days a week right now. I was training 6 days a week, but I'm at 5 days a week right now. I'm in my first shred,
Hmm.
which means I'm doing a lot of cardio. But that's just what I'm doing with my personal free time is I'm bodybuilding. But on the professional level, what I've been focusing on a lot for the last year is menopausal health. And so I'm postmenopausal. Um, Menopause was a huge experience for me. I think it is for a lot of people. And as a gender queer, non-binary person, it was harder to access resources for menopause support than for a person who is, female identified or isn't questioning their gender. And so what I've been doing is I've been educating myself. I've become trained as a menopause doula. I'm in training as a certified menopause coach, and I'm working with queer, trans, and non-binary folk around menopause transition. So I'm doing menopause coaching. I'm doing my other coaching too, but I'm doing menopause coaching a lot right now. Um, I am also doing on that note, I have a speaking engagement coming up with Residence 11 for the Desire Summit in Jersey City in mid-April. And then I also have a conversation coming up with Heather Corina, who is the author of What Fresh Hell Is This, which is a non-binary perspective on menopause. And so those are some of the things that I have coming up in the immediate future, mostly in the month of April. But definitely, if people are interested in hearing more about menopause coaching, they should get in touch with me.
Absolutely. And we'll put all the contact information and links to books and other works, like articles in the bio as well. I want to go back to jailbreaking for a minute, if you don't mind. I know this really wasn't necessarily in the questions, but as I talk to you, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. Over the years, as an older pagan, I've seen us go from, we went from a space in the 70s and 80s where there was just a lot of talk about male and female principles, and it was a lot of very stereotypical ideas about it. Then I think in the 90s and the early, part of the new century, we started shifting the focus and thinking about different things. And we had a lot of people in the communities that were either non-binary, or there were issues because people that were transgendered had a lot of biases against them in the community and stuff like that. And I don't want to, get too big with this because it could go off in a lot of different directions. But as we've changed things and we've changed, like we used to talk about things like you said, the maiden, mother, crone, etc. And then on the male side, we never really, I think, talked about it that deeply, unfortunately. And so how do you think things have changed? I see a really different energy with younger people. in the millennials or the Generation Z, they have a whole different perspective that's very exciting to me. I look at it and I see that they're kind of saying, we're going to do what we want to do. What have you seen change, and what's your perspective of where things are going?
I think, thanks for that question. It's a great one. I think that there are two very interesting trends in Gen Z right now. I mean, there of course are more than that, but I'm
Yeah,
two dominant trends are coming to mind in paganism or in pagan oriented spirituality. One is a trend toward sort of post gender uh or gender fluid awareness, right?
right.
So sort of like not buying into the gender essentialism, very, very fluid relationship formats, very fluid gender identity, very fluid sexual identity, and like a million different names that we can call ourselves, from biromantic to, pansexual to agender, right? Lots
Yeah,
of different terms to define our sexuality and gender identities. And I think it's great. I think it's beautiful. I think it's amazing. And I think it holds so much potential for the future. There's concurrently another trend that's happening that I think is worth mentioning, which is it's it is a gender essentialist trend that is kind of inspired by the tradwife movement. I don't know if you've heard about the tradwife movement, but
I have not.
the tradwife movement is wild. It's like a retrogressive um traditional wifing identity.
Hmm.
And by traditional I mean like 1950s era.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's like folks who are deciding, electing to take on very designated gender essentialist roles based in 1950s nuclear family model.
oh, and that's
It's
happening now.
it's wild. It's wild. So that is a thing that's happening, and it's happening within the pagan movement in this sort of really intense gender essentialist, mentality of like, uh, you know, the whole concept of reducing women to our biological utility, over, in my opinion, over identification with our sexual and procreative capacity. Um, so there's two concurrent trends that are like polar opposites.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was going on. I would have. I would think somebody's kidding if they told me they were doing that.
Right? They're not kidding.
Oh wow.
There are some folks who are currently defecting from that way of life. They were, it's been around for like 10, 15 years, maybe at the most. But I know I read an article with an interview with someone the other day. I can't remember her name, but she was a trad wife. She was in a trad wife arrangement for like 10 years. She was the stay-at-home mom with the kids, you know, cooking food from scratch, doing the whole thing, et cetera, et cetera. Her spouse, her husband was the breadwinner. And she extricated herself from that. She's now working with people who want to leave the tradwife um, movement and helping them to transition.
Wow, that's just, I mean, wow, that blows my mind. I never would have thought about something like that. Where do you think we're going? I mean, with what you're seeing now and the people you've talked to, where do you think we're heading in the next 10 years, 20 years?
Well, I mean, I think it really depends on a lot of things. And one of the things that it depends on is where our elections go this year, honestly.
Mhm.
I think if I mean, I just read an article, or I just started reading an article in Ms. yesterday. I have not finished it. I think it's called the 2040 plan. It is a plan by the right wing to roll back rights on, women, women's rights, queer rights, transgender rights. And it's an articulated plan. um, of the right wing. We all know it's happening, but it's actually like this article is very kind of like clear about what the strategies are and perspectives. Um, so I think we are in danger currently. We're in danger of losing the headway that we've made, honestly. And if the election goes in the direction of the right wing, from the local levels to the national, we're at risk. And we already are dealing with the fallout from Trump's first round, and
Hmm.
the right, the Supreme Court justices that were put in during that time period. We're dealing with the fallout of that now. If it
Yeah.
if we have to deal with another 4 years of Trump, or maybe longer, because he says he'll only be a dictator on the first day,
Hmm.
um, you know, I don't know where we'll end up, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I worked the polls recently in a part of the Bay Area that was exceedingly red. I won't say where. And I saw men ushering their wives in to basically tell them how to vote. And it was something I would never have thought I would see in my lifetime, but it was like something you'd see in the 50s. It was horrible.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Exactly that. So that trend is concurrently occurring with the liberationist trend, right? And I think that one of the things that's really interesting to think about is the right wing, the conservative community, are fighting tooth and nail to roll back the sort of progress that has been made in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And they are conscious about it, and they're strategic about it. And the left wing is not as strategic as the right wing, and that's what scares me.
Yeah. I have to agree with you there. I want to ask you, what advice do you have for aspiring witches, sex educators, or a combination of both who are kind of wanting to combine their path as a witch with sex educator? Any advice for somebody that wants to do that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think this comes down to like the same thing that I said with like how to deal with bipolar disorder, right? Or
Hmm.
any mental health concern or consideration. Be strong in your daily practices, right?
Yeah.
And be strong in your dedication to your craft. And by your craft, I mean all of the things that we do. I don't just mean the magic that we work. I also mean the words that we say, the words that we write, the what we teach. Be strong in your craft. And I think that there's a lot to be said for dedication to your ancestors and guides and gods. And when I say ancestors, I mean our ancestors of spirit and inspiration, as well as our lineages, whether
Yeah.
those are spiritual or biological, physical. Um, and I think another thing that is important for all of us to consider, no matter what we want to do, really, is to rely on a sense of internal alignment.
I like that. Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. I want to encourage people to look at the links I'm going to provide to look up your books and your articles. Sarah, thank you for being on the podcast. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you so much, Dean. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to speaking with you again at some point.
Thank you. That concludes my conversation with Lasara Firefox Allen. Lasara's journey through paganism from her upbringing to her groundbreaking work has been truly inspiring. For those who want to learn more, we've included links to Lasara's work in the episode description. We'll be back next week with another engaging conversation on paganism. Until then, may our paths be blessed with joy and discovery.